Board members, if we can get you to take your seat.
Janet, you need to we need to scoot in.
While people are coming, I think we've got a couple in the hall. They'll be coming in. We're going to do our standard assessment committee assignments. Then we're going to go to our action items that came out of executive session. So that puts board member Belknap. You'll be on deck.
Okay.
But not right now. So hopefully, well, we'll see what we can get done on our actionable items and standards and assessment. Board member Janet Cannon, are you going to handle this? Okay, I'll turn on your mic.
So
Thank you.
The happy news is we talked and talked a lot, and we went through many items. We just have one item for which there is a motion for the board. That item is the K-5 and 912 Science Standards draft. The motion is the Standards and Assessment Committee moves that the board approve the release of the K-5 912 Science Standards for a 90-day public review. This is where the standards will go out and input will be accepted from people on revisions, whatever kinds of things they want the committee to consider or the writing committee to consider, they will. We had an interesting conversation about this. We talked about the different meetings. They are scheduling public meetings to get input on these standards. And so now we move that the board release them for review.
Okay, let me just add, because you're given some of the direct, what's going to follow if this is released, if the motion passes on this, is the website gets modified, all of the notices go out for public comment, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
There will be something to comment on.
Very good. Okay, the motion before the board is that the board release, the board approve the release of the K through 5, 9 through 12 science standards for a 90-day public review. Discussion to the motion. Board member Jenny Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this. I think this is great. I think it's good. It's time to get some public input on this. I know that previously when we had done the science standards for the middle grades, the K through, not K, 6 through 8, is that what it was? That there was some great feedback, very productive feedback from community members, and I think it's time for that. So, speaking in favor.
Thank you. Board member Ellis.
I voted for this, but I want to make sure it's clear. I am not in support of the move towards national science standards, but the board had voted on moving forward with national science standards, so I agree it's time for public input. However, I do not want to make the same mistake that we made with the health standards and not talk about the dates at all, and then all of a sudden they're put out in the public and they're the week before a holiday and a week after a holiday. And so I just want to make sure when we put these out to the public, we talked about locations and we talked about kind of in general terms dates during committee, but I want to make sure before it's sent out to the public that the board has at least had a look at the dates proposed.
Let's see, Chair, would you mind if Ricky Scott came forward and spoke to the public input meetings, the locations that have been determined?
The dates.
And the dates? Do you have those dates? I know we talked about sites.
If you don't have dates yet sorry, Chair. I just don't want to.
There's some scheduling involved.
Okay, Ricky, please come up and.
Yeah, sorry. I was waiting for that invitation. I was kind of, yes? No?
Yes,
maybe?
come on up.
Ricky Scott, Science Specialist in Teaching and Learning. I actually have updated the document. So if you go into Board Docs now, the only thing that's changed is if you go to Board Docs, it actually has proposed dates and locations as well. I don't have a computer, so I can't put them up. But
Can someone hijack our screen and put those up?
it's the very first page of Board Docs. I just checked it. So
Have to go to last month?
No, I went like this one. Yeah, correct.
Where in board docs?
Is it in the summary?
Yes, under the summary?
Oh, it's under the science standards.
It's sorry, I apologize. It's on the attached document with the standards themselves. The hope that when this gets approved, that this all would be there with them as well.
66 pages.
It's 10 grades.
It's on the seed, the K-5 and 9-12 seed draft standards document.
Go to the bottom?
In the backup.
At the end of the right.
It's right in the beginning, it's first page.
Oh, it's right here. It says
First page.
Oh, there we go.
I see. Thank you.
How close are we to having it up on the?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is where I went into this.
Okay, Elisa, Alice, you have a comment?
Well, one of my main concerns is that we would be holding all of them right smack dab in the middle of our legislative session. And that's basically when they all are, with only, it looks like 2 outside of it. So we had talked about possibly holding some later in the spring, or even postponing the start date so that we're not just right in the middle. I just do not want a repeat of what we just did, where hardly anyone was available to show up because it was the week after Thanksgiving and the week before Christmas. It doesn't seem like a very public-friendly thing to do. And so if we could even have something a little bit later.
Well, there's,
So it looks like January 22nd and 29th are before the session, and March 18th
Not the
and March.
29th.
The 29th is after the
29th's on.
Does the session begin?
On the Monday, 20.
Okay.
begins on the
28th.
Okay, but then, doesn't it end March 14th? So the 18th and the 20th.
Right, but
So we've
they're all-
got
those are
3
all
out of
pretty-
6 that are not
But those are
during
pretty
the
far.
legislature.
Nothing in, nothing. I just am not happy with what happened in health, and I just want to, that was the one concern I had during the meeting, was that we didn't do them all during the
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
So, and
okay, let's get some more comments happening. Board
Whatever.
Member Bolter?
Oh,
My
thank you
concern
feedback.
also is that the health standards were done in Cedar City, and I had requested that if we could possibly do them in St. George for the science standards, since we'd already had something in Cedar. Or we can even do it in Hurricane. I don't care, but.
Could I address that? I talked about that in the Standards and Assessment Committee. I felt, I wasn't aware of what had happened with health. My decision, at least when I put these and proposed these at least to the board, was that 6-8 was in St. George. And so I thought, since St. George had the opportunity for science, maybe now we move it to a different location to talk about the other
All
parts.
those years ago.
Sure. But it was 3 years ago.
Right,
Well-
3 years ago, but I'm just saying that the health standards were also in
just-
Iron County.
and I
And
agree.
I agree with Board Member Ellis, with it being in the middle of the legislative session, it just kind of feels like
Can I-
the last ones were like right in between.
Yeah, and I want to speak to this, and I haven't spoke to a lot of, I haven't put a lot of my concerns in for my constituents, but when you look at, I think I have 14, almost 15, no, I have 15 school districts in my voting district, and I'm not complaining, but if we're going to start lobbying for places and that, dang, I'm not. What are you doing to me? But this is why I'm not that concerned, because my people can go online and they can communicate, and if they choose and they want to travel, they will like that Cedar City over St. George for accessibility geographically. But I don't think that's. I don't want to hold up our standards process because of some locations and.
Could we also add St. George? Just driving through in the winter to Cedar is horrible.
I like Mesquite too, but Okay, so we have to move this forward. We're trying to get this done. We have 3 out of the 6 are not with the legislative, when the legislative session's on. There is a request to have a meeting in St. George added and/or move this one. I think these are all operational, by the way, and I don't think the board dictates everything on every meeting that this facility requests, but can that be taken under consideration,
I guess I look to.
Superintendent?
I look to Diana and to Sid, I guess. I mean, they're my boss.
Okay. Board Member Ellis?
I think that, I'm just wondering, you have one time difference, the 6 to 8, and I'm guessing that's Alpine's own scheduling thing. I don't know if you want to talk to Jody to see what was a better time period, because I know she did them at 4, and I know a lot of people said it was really hard to get to. And so I thought that when we talked in committee meeting, that the science centers were going to remain in the evening like you had them previously, instead of kind of that early evening where it's difficult for people to leave the office and get there.
Again, I look for feedback and direction, so I will
Sorry, I
write this
thought we
down
gave
and-
it during committee when we talked
Yeah.
specifically about times, but the January 29th, I've been convinced is the second day of the session, and that possibly people aren't going to be as busy yet, so they'll be okay. So that's good. I was going to ask you to reconsider that main broadcast one, but yeah, I would recommend changing them to 6, not 4.
Yeah, so the issue comes is that, at least the feedback that we have received, is that when it comes to parents, there's an issue between parents, but also with educators as well. There's a lot of times that once you hit 6 o'clock, they're done. And so I think that's some of the feedback we got as well in our committee meeting as well, was that generally the public have much flex. If there's something they're interested in, there's something they can be flexible with, and I guess the same with the teachers. But that was something that, again, was put into consideration.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I
Board
think I
Member
looked
Lisa
at Jenny, 'cause-
Board Member Lisa Cummins?
I'm sorry. It was the time change as well from 6 to, just parents and some educators as well, because sometimes they're doing after-school activities and they can't get out of that as well. So a later time would be more conducive to the people that I've heard from.
Board Member Bolter?
I was going to say the same thing. I had some educators that wanted to go, college professors as well, for the health standards, and what prevented it was the weather, and then the fact that they'd have to leave a whole hour, and it was starting at 4:30, I think is what it was. So they would miss work. So it
Board
would be
Member
better 6 to 8.
Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. Ricky, help me, if by statute, how many of these meetings are we really supposed to hold? Are they 3?
3.
3. So my question would be, it's winter time, you could do late ones. Why don't we move a couple of these to online rather than traveling during the winter and open them up and do them online?
So from this, just to be clear, from this building online, just have multiple,
Yeah,
okay?
why do you have to go to a location? Especially traveling in the winter.
Board Member Ellis?
I'm just going to advocate again for a later time. I'm looking at all these dates. I live in Wasatch County. If you're an educator and you want to go to this meeting, you have to drive an hour to the nearest meeting. Maybe 45 minutes if you're speeding, but it's winter, so most likely an hour and a half. And so 4 o'clock really just inhibits a lot of people from the Wasatch back or more remote places to even be able to consider attending. So I am okay with online, depending on how we structure that, because I don't want to inhibit the input. And so before I said yes, I'd want to see how that was structured. And I don't know if we're in a hurry.
Oop, sorry. I hit it. So I just want to advocate for the online, because when you look at where you look at these locations, and I'm sure in my voting district, there's concerned educators and parents. Their only way in is something online and/or a written submission on that. But I don't think we're going to cater to the whole state for accommodations for in face unless they want to sacrifice something, especially the constituents in my voting district. For some of them to come up into Salt Lake, it's a 2-day affair. Board Member Cindy Davis.
I mean, I would completely support online, but are we going to set any norms for that or ground rules so that you don't have one person who comes and usurps all the airtime? I mean, the nice thing about going to locations is that different people have different airtime and you get sort of this wide variety of feedback from stakeholders. So maybe we set some norms like participate in one, but then if you watch the others, put your feedback online or in writing or something. I don't know.
Board Member Hanson. Scott
We had
Hanson.
this discussion in our committee meeting on a separate issue last night and talked about, in fact, we tasked some of the staff members to go out and investigate how we could do an interactive online. We talked about doing it with no feedback in the room, online only, so that we wouldn't be competing with live people in the room. But then the issue came up of authentication, I guess, to make sure that we were getting Utah residents who were commenting and not getting bombed by some special interest group with a lot of feedback on some of these issues. So that's something that should be considered, but I'm all for the online. I think we should work out those issues and make that happen.
Board Member Hanson.
I'm for online as well, but you've got to remember that we're trying to get feedback. When you're online, you're watching, and so unless there's a way that we can get feedback from the people watching online, it's not actually serving our purpose.
Board Member Boulder.
I too like the idea of online, but same with Board Member Hanson, that to make sure there's a way to get feedback and as far as the locations, if the times were changed for the in-person to be later in the evening, that would be really helpful. And so I can travel to Cedar. I'll just leave earlier if it's bad weather.
Okay. Well, the motion before the board is that the board approve the release of the K through 5, 9 through 12 science standards for a 90-day public review. And we have all these other considerations on the timing to factor in. I'm not saying any other. I knew better. I saw you move.
I just a little nervous. Are they going to, if they're just going to consider it, is there going to be any follow-up? Why don't we just approve they get released pending all of this other stuff? Is there a time constraint? I know you want them done, but
Okay, well,
if we didn't
hold on.
start the public comment until.
That's the second part. The timing thing is the next part of, there's two parts that we're doing. One is that we're going to release the standards. Then the next one, when you look, motion for the board, then there's a second that says this, that the board approved the requirements to have one of the standards review public meetings at USB
Right.
to approve the 6. We're not to that yet.
Okay, but if we say we're going to approve the standards for a 90-day public review and we don't have, we probably should put a when clause in there. So it's not starting tomorrow if we aren't going to have this all worked out for another week, because that cuts into the 90 days. That's my only concern. Does that make sense?
It's kind of, it's like,
Technically, if it was approved today, I have everything in place to open up the online survey, and that could begin. And we have 90 days to schedule these 6 meetings, and if the board decides that I move it back further, then we have time to make those adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
you can also amend something or try to deal with something on the 28th too, if you don't like the dates.
Was that, are we amending?
I'm going to go back to the motion again that came from committee, and that is that the board release the K through 5, 9 through 12 science standards for 90-day public review. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting carries unanimously. The next part was,
The standards.
that came out of committee that we went to. Do you want me to address that, or do you want to?
I can just go ahead. The same issue you're chatting about here was discussed in our committee meeting, and we determined that if we had a location for one of these meetings on the Wasatch Front, that we could do that online and hopefully get more input. So the Standard and Assessment Committee also moves that the board approve the requirement to have one of the standards review public meetings at USBE to approve the 6 sites for the K-5 912 Science Public Review meeting.
Okay, that's a motion that came from committee, so that's a motion that comes to the board. And the board approved the requirement to have one of the standards review public meetings at USBE to approve the 6 sites for the K-5 912 Science Public Review meetings. Okay, that's where we do our work, right here. Board Member Belknap.
I'd like to amend that motion.
Okay,
I'd like to amend it that there are 3 on-site public meetings that we have to have
That are
that.
online.
No, that are, you go out to those.
Oh,
We
okay.
have to by statute, right, go out? Okay, and that the other 3 are done online from here, and that they are done later in the evening rather than 4 to 6.
would you want to,
It doesn't matter.
okay, is there a second to that amendment? I am not seeing a second to your amendment. Oh, thank you. Got it. Did you get that second? We have a motion and a second, and that is to amend the motion to read that there will be 3, to read that we have, or approve that we have the standards review public meeting at USBE and 3 on-site meetings and 3 online meetings, with the on-site being later evening meetings. Do you want to be specific to time? Board Member Belknap?
Just for clarity, the one that's at USBE could be one of the site ones. It could be one of the site ones. So there's 6
Okay.
total meetings.
To include the USBE, okay.
Yes, and, no?
I would rather that be one of the online ones.
I don't care. 3 and 3 and let Ricky pick. And, I'm not kidding about that. And that they.
This is your motion, so
That they
state it
start
how
at
you
6
want it.
o'clock.
Start at 6.
So 3, your motion is 3 on-site, with one of them being USBE. Do you want to give a time? So we can,
At 6 o'clock. Could be at any time.
okay,
Just ask her if one of the on-site ones is USB-E or not. That's what I'm not.
that's what she's just saying, is one of them is.
I thought she said the opposite.
Did you say one of the opposite? Oh,
No, actually.
I just want to get her motion right.
I figured the one could be here for the Salt Lake area. No, I like it to be on site.
Okay, do you want to, look, Ms. Lorraine, can you restate the amendment?
Okay. So the amendment is that the board hold 3 on-site public meetings for the Science Standards Review, with one being at the USBE, and that the other 3 are done online from the USBE and held after 6 p.m. Is that correct?
Very nice, Miss Lorraine.
Okay, Board Member Ellis.
I would like to amend your motion to be a little bit more specific,
My amendment?
your amendment. So I'm thinking the 3 on-site, which is confusing because that seems like that should be here, but the 3 out in the field ones to be Cedar City, Brigham City, and American Fork. There's one of those in each month, and not have one of your meetings the online meetings be considered here, because then you've got 4 meetings in this office, and it just makes it less of an outreach for people. So I kind of try to do bottom, middle, and northern part of the state. And then I would also propose that the structure of the online meetings be brought back in our January 2-hour meeting, just so we can look and see how that's going to work out. So that's my amendment. So in essence, it changes it to 3 out in the field, 3 on site here at the USBE.
Okay, I'll second that.
I amended her amendment to name the 3 out in the field locations. The American Fork, he can keep the same dates. American Fork, Brigham City, Cedar City.
Are you good with this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just going to call it not an amendment. This is the amendment. So we're
Great.
going to restate the amendment.
That we
We're-
are,
Okay.
okay. The amendment is that we will hold 3 out-of-office science review, which will be in Iron County,
Mark,
same
you need to
date.
turn on her mic.
Oh,
Oh,
I was yelling.
I was hearing just fine.
Iron County, same date. American Fork, same date is already established, and Brigham City with the same date already established, however, the time to be changed to a later time.
6 to
And then,
8.
and then also to have 3 online done, I don't care where you do them from this office out to the field at the same time around 6 o'clock or whatever time you establish. I think they should be consistent. And that the online setting, see, for me, this doesn't make any sense because that's the way we live, but that the online setting is capable of giving feedback and collecting information from people. And bring it back in our January 28th meeting. Is that our date? It's the 30th.
Report the online.
It's the 30th. It's the 30th.
Sorry, it's whatever date Mark told me.
Yeah, January 30th meeting, just really quick for an update if we have any questions. Oh, please, Brittany.
31st.
31st.
Okay, that is the, you're tracking it because I'm not. I've surrendered. Board Member Gravitt.
So I guess my concern is we're spending a lot of time on something we don't even know if we have the capability. We talked in standards last night about do we even have a system? They're researching that. They're looking into that. Do we even have a place where we can input? And so we're spending a lot of time on scheduling these meetings when Ricky could do that, staff could do that. Most of our input comes from the survey anyway. Doesn't matter when you schedule it. I just think we let that decision be for staff and for people in charge of it, and they bring it to us and we can decide. But right now with the online stuff, we don't even know if we have the capability. So anyway, they're working on it, but we don't know that yet.
Okay. I still have Elise's mic on. Is that for a reason?
Nope, I just left it in case someone saw
In case- I'm turning your mic off. Okay, we still have a lot of work to do here. The other way that I consider your motion, and that is if this online thing is not doable, we don't have the capability in our January 31st meeting, then we change it. Then we can add 3, but at least we're in compliance with having this release. So I'm good. Can you restate the motion? Because I'm not gonna. Okay, here we go. Because I think we need to vote on this.
Okay,
Okay, we're gonna vote after this, you guys, so pay attention, please.
the amendment is that the board,
Well, no, she's just redoing her whole motion.
we have the committee motion, so this amends the committee motion.
Yeah,
So it
this
is an
amends the
amendment.
committee. Okay, got it.
Okay,
All right.
so the amendment is that the board hold science review meetings, or review of the standards, 3 out of the office in Iron County, American Fork, and Brigham City, on the same dates already established, and that the board hold 3 online review meetings from the USBE, and be able to receive input at those meetings, with all meetings held after 6 p.m., and that the format of the meetings be brought to the board at its January 31st meeting.
Correct. All in favor,
That's clumsy.
say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Thank you very much, Ms. Lorraine, and,
One of the meetings is scheduled before, maybe it's
no, we'll have a different schedule. On the online.
already set.
Yeah, those, 3 of them are.
But is that before the January meeting?
Yes, the American one is scheduled for January 22nd.
Public one.
Before the January meeting.
It doesn't matter. The only thing we're going to change is the online.
Yeah, and the first online one we can have on the 29th, and that is before the 31st.
Was there anything else, Board Member Bolter? Or no, not Bolter, no, Board Member Cannon, sorry.
That does us. Thank you.
All right.